Talking with famous people.
So you're only decent when it's easy to be decent?
I'm decent by preserving an ecosystem that punishes indecency, which includes the ESFP stubborn, subjective insistence that their own reality be deemed objective by others. This is the problem. Like Brittany comes in here, it's not okay that everybody say just shit on her because she wants to be an ENTP. It's also not okay for her to insist that everybody just accept as a basic assumption that she is one and argue from that starting point. So no, we're not going to accept your reality. You have to establish it in some way.
I think that, at least for me, since I know the system, since I know that problems will probably happen, I have a responsibility to deal with them since I know why they're happening. I have knowledge.
But sometimes the best thing to do is to preserve the integrity of the system. Just because a team loses badly, loses 80 to 10 in a league, doesn't mean that we have to change the rules of the league so that that team doesn't get beat so bad anymore. Maybe next year they'll have a better squad, whatever. There are always going to be outliers in any system with integrity. And we don't adjust the system or compromise the integrity of the system just because there are instances it produces that are undesirable.
Well, yes, you said that you concede that how you went about it was probably wrong.
It was not my proudest moment because he wasn't a worthy opponent and I was beating him up unnecessarily just because I was in a pissy mood. Not that I did anything objectively transgressive. He didn't have any right to not be treated like that because he was bringing, as Taylor says, aggressive wrongness. But it's beneath me.
You know, if you fight fire with fire, it's less effective if you fight it with water.
Okay, well, that's assuming you want both people not to get burned again, right? I'm fine. I need no aloe.
What I would have done in that situation is probably bring up some facts and figures, showing him, hey, this is what you're using often. This is what you're using often. And these are the statistics that many people agreed upon that shows that why you're wrong.
Okay,
and done it in a way that's upsetting.
Well, why is it better to convince him than it is to punish him for his wrongness?
Because you're smarter than that, I believe.
Like I said, I agree that
I
agree in that instance it was beneath me to mess around with that shit. It wasn't worth it. But if let's say it was a more worthy opponent, why is it better for me to convince them than it is to punish them for their wrongness? Believe me, I can make a particular wrongness toxic to them, so they run away from it in the future and they at least try to express their wrongness differently. It's not the carrot, it's the stick. But why do we always have to prefer the carrot?
Because it didn't work. I would say because it didn't work.
It depends on what the goal is, right?
The goal is to convince when having.
Why is that my goal? Why do you keep insisting that be my goal?
I'm saying it's easier to use a convincing argument.
That's not a goal I can attain. I can't meaningfully attain. I can't know what your belief is. I can attain the fact that you failed to establish this, therefore we negate as a matter of course, as a matter of argumentation. I can show that your arguments are weak as shit. I can do all that stuff. That I can do determinately. What I can't do determinately is affect your belief. I can make it so that you know the experience of suffering from bringing that particularly poorly shaped wrongness to the table and trying to feed it to me. Again, it's not to help you. It's not to convince you. It's the natural consequence of your own fucking wrongness.
You might convince the audience, but when it comes to the person...
Why am I trying to convince?
Platform.
What Eric's trying to say is that from the very beginning, you're still explaining how he could best convince them. Why is he even trying to do that?
Like, you don't want to do that? It's up to him. I'm just laying out what could be a different route to take to better win those type of discussions.
Winning and convincing are not equivalent. I do not accept that winning equals convincing. That's the difference. I'm looking to a objective third-party metric. Whether any given third party agrees with that metric is irrelevant because I know what the metric is on an objective level. So I can point to people who do know objectively how this argumentation chain played out, and I can say who won the chain, and it's obvious who won the chain. It's not an interested calculus, it's a disinterested calculus. And so it doesn't fucking matter to me whether the other person's convinced or not. It matters whether I objectively won the argument chain.
Probably take into considerations the person you was having discussion with feelings.
Okay, well, I've already conceded that in that particular instance, I shouldn't have beat up Conk because it's beneath me. Not because his feelings are hurt, I don't give a fuck, but because it was beneath me, and it's embarrassing to do things that are beneath me.
Did you? I didn't see the video. Did you successfully beat up Conk, or did you try to beat up Conk and Conk didn't know that you were trying to beat him up?
Kind of a half and half, maybe.
Because I don't ever feel like I won when I'm trying to insult somebody and they can't even meet me halfway. But for whatever reason, the brand of ESFP that finds this place is just batshit crazy.
Somebody who uses FI and TE, their feelings will come first, then thinking later. I try to take the easier route when it comes to certain topics that I'm trying to convince people to switch on.
It's in the glasses.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm not really trying to convince people. I'm saying, here are my presentation of the strongest arguments. You're going to do with it whatever you wish. If you wish to dispute their strongest arguments, then win one of the argument chains. Otherwise, you can say whatever you want, but I've already made my case, and you can believe it or not. I don't give a fuck. The point is, if you don't have a better argument to defeat the arguments I'm making, don't keep coming around me and making ridiculous claims that other people ought ascribe to your subjective reality.
I can agree.
Some people see communication as, oh, I'm talking in order to express parts of myself to others. And other people see it as, I'm talking in order to express parts of things that are not me to others. In other words, I'm talking to other people about things that are universal, that are common between us, versus representing things that are particular to me. Now, if you're talking about things that are universal between us, then you expect the person who's making a claim to be saying this applies to everybody. So, like, in other words, if I say I'm an ENTP, I'm saying I'm an ENTP and you should believe I'm an ENTP. Because according to universal metrics that we can both refer to, it indicates that I am. FI people go, I'm an ENTP. It's like the same thing to them as saying, I'm feeling sad this morning. It's not a question that's open for dispute or analysis on any kind of objective level because it's an expression of their identity, not an expression of some universal idea. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the disagreement comes in or the conflict comes in. So when I say preserving the integrity of the system, what I'm saying is I want people to come in and be able to make statements and have those statements critiqued on objective grounds. But if obviously it's not a universal rule, because somebody comes in and says, I really feel sad today, my cat went missing. Everybody's going to go, justify that. Explain why it is that it's okay for you to feel sad just because your cat went missing. Nobody's going to say that. They're going to all go, oh, I'm sorry, because they respect that that's an FI situation. But the problem is when there's a disagreement about what constitutes an FI situation, what constitutes a TI situation. With somebody like an ESFP, they don't have a distinction between the two. They think everything is an FI situation.
Then he got into the shower or bath and got ready, and then I wake up to him standing with his penis at my nose. I'm like, I wanted to sleep in.
Kim, I was just...
All right, Eric. Here's what you gotta do next time Kim's being difficult. Just lay down and start doing it yourself. And be super cranky and obvious about it. And you're like, well, one of us is gonna do it. And just keep doing that up until her FE collapses.
It's good advice, sir. I'm going to keep that in mind.
Eric, we have all day.
Okay, but you know how this goes, Kim. Look, because she'll always be like, well, now's not a good time because the fern needs to be watered. Well, It's going to bypass my own brain. By the power vested in me as the Eulorian Archpastor, do I hereby transubstantiate this bong rip to Sean's brain. I transubstantiate thee!
Look at him. Open your mouth, Sean. Open your mouth. Yeah. And slowly exhale. idea.
And it's not even a probation violation if it's transubstantiated.
I like him.
Works, huh?
I'm not used to it, but that went straight to the head.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thank you. I have a question of how your TI works when it comes to your political beliefs.
Oh no.
The issues we have in this country with our cops more have to do with the training than their personality.
Okay, I want to disagree with that entirely, though, because, look, my whole point about the cops is we need to stop focusing on shit like training and what's going on in their heads and whether they have the right attitudes and a bunch of other irrelevant bullshit. And the only thing we need to worry about is holding them accountable to the same fucking standards we hold everybody else accountable to. If you fire a gun at somebody and they don't have a weapon and it turns out they weren't a threat, you have committed murder. It's not real. It's not self-defense because you had a reason to feel afraid for your life. That's just
they
not
did that because
fucking
of
good
the
enough.
training. It comes from the training. They do that due to
But
the
that
training. So if you
doesn't
go back to
justify
the
anything. Their training doesn't justify anything. Murder is not
reduced
justified by training.
if you look at the other industrialized nations in the world, they do not have this problem like we do here in the States.
Okay, but
It's not simply a training thing. Training is maybe a part of it because they barely have to do any to become one. But you've got a whole culture, you've got a whole legal system
that excuses
that
it.
operates through lack of transparency, policy reviews, and bullshit fear for your life things to justify poor behavior and still prosecute the victim.
You want to solve the
It's a
problem, fucking put the cops in jail who commit the crimes. It's that simple.
I think we could have our cake and eat it too. I don't think we need to just focus on one. I think there's a list. Oh shoot!
You know what? They've been focusing on your approach for the last 100 million fucking years. Every single time there's some sort of shooting, oh, well, we really need to work on training. You need to really go to fucking jail, you murderer.
You're right, and you're 100% right. But we can do that and do the other thing that I just
Okay, but we've been doing that. That's not even a change. You're not even advocating a change of the status
We
quo.
have not. We have not been doing that in this country.
We're still
No
training,
way I
though.
would-
We're still changing the way we train.
It's the type of training. You gotta get specific to the type of training that's taking place. And the type of training they're teaching most of our cops is, hey, if you fear your life 1%, take that shot. And you're right.
The training wouldn't do a goddamn bit of good if, in fact, cops were being arrested and put in jail every time they shot somebody and there was inadequate cause. It didn't matter how much fucking training they were told to shoot. They say, like, shoot anybody all the time because of the training. If those cops ended up going to jail when they actually did it, then cops wouldn't do it. No matter what the fucking training said. And on the other hand, if they can get away with it in the legal system and they get away with murder and they're excused for it because they're a cop, well, then it doesn't matter what the training says. They're gonna do it and they are gonna get away with it because some of them are gonna be fucking worthless pricks.
You're right. I'm not saying you're wrong on that. I think you're 100% right. I'm just saying that we have to do what you just said along with change how we train our officers.
Sure, let's
I think
change
we
how
can
we
do
train.
both. To do both to get the maximized positive effect.
There
Okay,
needs
sure,
to be a
fine.
whole change to the law enforcement system, including police training and just the PR thing, the way people perceive police at all. All police misconduct gets swept under the rug. They keep getting touted as the heroes, our brave men and women risking their lives. It's way more dangerous to be a roofer. It's like 5 times more dangerous to put shingles on a roof than it is to be a cop.
I did put the link here for my Realizing the Promise of American Democracy, my particular platform for the United States of America. How things should be changed.
I want to ask this overall, how things should be changed. Should it be a TI approach or a TE approach? What I mean by TE approach, should it be what we know what works in other developed nations and implemented here because we know it's working, or should it be something new and original?
My answer to your question is, I'll be coming into the office of presidency as an executive whose powers and prescriptions of power, and conscriptions of power are defined by the Constitution. I attempt to respect that. So I'd be a federalist in some sense. I'd go in there and say, here's what the office of the presidency ought to do. Here's areas that are legitimized by my being empowered by this office, things that I can do to affect good changes. How am I going to define what good changes are? Well, the answer is I'm mostly concerned about case law. So I want to use the office of presidency to use the attorney general to challenge existing rulings that empower the federal government to do things the federal government ought not to have been empowered to do. So I want to roll back federal activism on a judicial level. I want to roll back that case law. I want to stack the Supreme Court with properly minded judges. I want to constrain the federal government to its proper scope. And that means I have to respect the scope of the presidency as well. I'm not going to be overstepping my powers.
So you get rid of judicial review.
No.
That's
not what I said at all. I said I'd argue cases in front of the courts that instead of arguing for more federal power to do shit, would be arguing against existing cases where the federal government has overstepped its power as prescribed by the Constitution. So in other words, I'd be using the Attorney General's office in the opposite way of what is normally done to roll back bad case law precedent setting decisions by previous courts. Hopefully by most of these things would get to the Supreme Court. Well, for example, Hernandez Angel versus the United States, in which the Commerce Clause was extended so far as to render the growing of marijuana on one's own property for one's own personal use justifiably under the purview of federal authority because it's an example of interstate commerce because it potentially affects the drug trade by removing a consumer from the marketplace by growing their own weed. So it was an insanely poor and illogical court decision that extended the scope of the Commerce Clause beyond anything anybody could possibly reasonably interpret it to mean. And thus, I would like to see that court decision reversed. How can I get it reversed? I can, instead of going to the court to say I'm arguing in favor of this, I could argue on behalf of a petitioner, say somebody who's been arrested for these crimes before, and say the prosecution now argues in favor of releasing this person on these constitutional grounds. It would have to be specifically narrowly focused. And if you launch a bunch of those sort of cases, you're bound to get make some headway in case law, which is what really matters, which matters much more than regular law.
I agree with what you said, but you said you would go to the court to get that change. Wouldn't it, to me, at least what I believe, make more sense just to stop the courts from having that power to create and strike down laws in the first place? That power shouldn't be
that's insane.
Court thing.
Look, you've got if you the last thing you want is a fully empowered executive branch. If you imagine Trump unchecked.
No, executive don't have that power to create legislation.
It doesn't matter. The thing is, if the executive branch is not checked by the judicial branch, the executive branch just starts issuing executive orders and doing whatever the fuck it wants. Pretty soon you got Putin. The judicial branch brings them to a halt because everybody at the end of the day is going to respect the judicial branch's interpretation of the law. So if the judges say, no, don't enforce Trump's travel ban, it's not enforced. The only thing that Trump could theoretically do is try to get the army out or just ignore the courts like Andrew Jackson did. But that's probably not going to happen in this modern day and age. Checks and balances are critical for the sustenance of any semblance of democracy. If you get the right executive in place, like me, I'll restore the balance of democracy to the nation. That's my primary goal. I will change the discourse about government. And it's not going to be an ideologically framed thing. It's going to be a universally applicable thing.
I believe the courts got us in the situation where we're at right now. There was no president, no senator that ever said that our politicians should represent the big powers of corporations and very, very, very wealthy people. It was the judges that said that. That's what enables corporations and very rich people to influence our politicians to not represent us.
That's not how it goes down.
It represents them.
That's not the problem. First of all, corporations are economic interests first and foremost. Some of them have vested political interests as well. Those things, it's a free market of corporations, each investing as much as they feel like in given political causes. Some of them have more influence than others, and sometimes that's lamentable or not lamentable or whatever. But the core problem is a lack of framework that we can universally agree upon constrains government, constrains, limits. Okay, so we don't want government interfering in corporations. Why? Because that harms everybody. Because corporations are one manner of wealth creation. In other words, wealth doesn't exist until people apply labor to a resource. Most people apply labor to a resource through some sort of organizational structure. You apply it to a resource directly. So you earn money directly. But even so, you still operate as a cog in an organizational structure of some sort, right? That creates new wealth when you do labor, because it's meaningful labor that's applied usefully to somebody else's life. Anytime that occurs, new wealth is created. So the government doesn't distribute wealth in any sense. In other words, when they take corporations' ability to create new wealth away from them by limiting them unnecessarily through unnecessary regulation, and I'm not saying all regulation is unnecessary, but a lot of it is, and a lot of it's inappropriate. So when there are those sort of limitations, then they're not helping the poor or something. They're hurting everybody. Corporations aren't bad for the poor. They're the reason poor people aren't nearly as poor as they used to be. And all economic enterprises are. Capitalism is what happens naturally when there's not use of force that imposes external constraints on people. So it's a good thing that corporations be empowered and enabled to do their good work of creating wealth that then we all will be able to access in some fashion. We each do good work when we do work in economic activity and create new wealth in the world. And that's why the world keeps getting richer and richer and richer, even though the total number of resources per person is diminishing. It would seem odd. Well, it's because wealth is a metaphysical quality. It's leverage of person against person. And as you accumulate more wealth, you have more leverage. So it's natural and okay that leverage be leveraged in certain ways, provided basic rights respecting frameworks are in place that prevent that thing from being exercised as instances of injustice against individuals. The primacy of the individual.
And you allow those corporate entities to keep influencing our politicians with unlimited amount of money? You think that's an overstep of regulation if we said, no, you can't do that?
I mean, I think campaign contributions are... I mean, what I would say to that is I have a much more direct response to that. I will go do it myself.
You will go do it yourself.
Yeah, I will go be the politician that is immune from all those criticisms.
We've been doing it for Marbury versus Madison was in the 70s, 40 years, and it hasn't changed.
I will go do it myself. Okay, Strauss 2024. Don't worry, I put for you a link.
You would do it yourself, but
I will.
You're just one person. I'm talking about.
I'm going to become president.
The hundreds of senators and politicians who are influenced by those.
Okay, well, I'm going to become
you're
president.
Just one person.
I'm going to become president, though. That's a pretty significant person. I'm going to use that pulpit to change the way people discuss the political endeavor that is a citizen democracy.
So you can you're trying to change the narrative, which is fine. All right,
that's the most powerful thing a person can do, ultimately. So if I'm president, I'm mostly interested in changing how the courts interpret laws and how the people talk about government. Okay?
So you would try to change how the court said that money can be.
No, I wouldn't try to change that. No. See, you're still cued in on this. You have a person to blame. It's called corporations. That means you're framework.
No. I blame the structure.
But that's not the thing to blame. Okay? That's the wrong thing to blame. What I'm telling you is the thing to blame is anything that legitimizes rights violations. Now, if corporations get tax breaks and stuff, that's a good thing. That's a good thing because they've earned that money, so they should get to keep as much of it as possible. Right? We want taxing people as just saying, I'm going to take away from you what you've rightfully earned.
No, I don't want them influencing my politician. Our politicians should be.
But everybody's influenced by multiple sources.
Not millionaires and billionaires.
Everybody's influenced.
That dump millions of dollars. We
Okay,
cannot
but
compete.
everybody's influenced. Listen to me. Listen. If I am a politician, and I'm running for president, and I put my platform up there, okay? Realizing the promise of American democracy. I put the link in the chat. It's a platform in progress that explains to you what all my policies are. Now, it's up here before anybody gives me any money, okay? Let's say some big, rich person decides he likes my platform and wants to contribute to my campaign. Now, it would be possible to conclude that therefore I've been influenced by that person, except I have my platform out ahead of time. You can see it already, right? It's in progress. You can mark its progress over time. You can ask me about specific policies and my prescriptions on those things. One of the things that I'm going to be very clear about to any donor is if you support me, you're supporting the me that I am presenting here. I am not going to be influenceable by anybody, okay? But it doesn't mean that I think it's a good idea to violate the rights of others to donate money for political causes as they see fit, because it's a freedom of speech issue, which is more important.
You think money is freedom of speech?
I think the ability to spend money that one has rightfully earned to voice and promote political positions is absolutely an example of free speech. Indisputably so.
No president in our history of this country, no politician has ever said that to be true. The courts did.
I'm telling you this. I'm saying if I have $100 million that I have earned fair and square and I want to spend it on political advertising, that's my fucking right.
Not unlimited.
Why?
Not to the point where it drowns out the majority of us, we the people.
Okay.
Because corporations makes billions of dollars.
But listen to me. Here's the
and
good
they can
news.
use a limited amount of that to influence our politicians. We cannot compete with that, which is why we're in the situation.
Here's the good news. Not everybody who's rich has nefarious goals in mind. Okay, there are multiple rich people and they have conflicting views. So different arguments enter the marketplace of ideas. Now this is a good thing. Now here's the other good news for you. I've got the solution. I'm going to be president. And I will prove to you by becoming president that it doesn't matter who contributes to my campaign. I'm still going to be the same president I always would be, regardless. And that if you contribute to my campaign, it would be because you know I'm not going to be the kind of person who's subject to undue influence. I'm going to do what's best and right all the time. Which means, for example, I'm not going to support violating the rights of others to speak freely with their political campaign or their contributions just because people who might otherwise support me don't like that position. I'm going to state exactly why you can't support that position. I'm going to be principled in my restraint. That's the number one job of government. Principled restraint. That's why you can trust me not to be influenced, because I'm not being influenced by the desirability as a political position of saying I'm going to limit people's free speech that you don't think have the legitimate cause to have that free speech, because I don't know why.
You do not create law.
Okay, well, I've already explained to you the mechanism by which I'm going to solve this. I'm going to use the courts and the Attorney General's office. But you've not actually countered this point at all. You're just saying that, right? Because I've established the mechanism I'm going to use. You've not disputed it's a valid mechanism to set case law. You've not disputed that case law is a valid mechanism to solve this sort of problem. You've not disputed that would be the appropriate venue to accomplish changes in case law. So why in the world should we dispute your claim? Why in the world should we embrace your claim that it has no solvency?
Because the most effective way to stop it completely is to advocate for legislation that will stop corporations from donating millions of unlimited dollars to not only maybe you,
matter if the court's invalidated on constitutional grounds. There's already a law that overrides that. It's called the Constitution. If the courts do their job properly, they'll invalidate such congressional legislation. So you're wrong that that's a better way to achieve solvency. The best way to achieve solvency is the way I've indicated, which you've not disputed at all.
I disagree.
For no reason, though.
No, you can have those beliefs, but if you don't...
No, Sean, listen. You're talking about the court case that you don't like. The court ruling that says corporations can have unlimited donations. which is not actually what the court ruling says. Additionally, it doesn't say corporations are people. Lastly, it limits their ability to donate anonymously. So it's a multifaceted court decision that you're not even aware of the specifics of it, but yet you're arguing that you're against it. And yet when I point out that the actual way then to achieve solvency is to go through the courts, not through the legislation process, you insist that congressional legislation is a solvency, and that when I point out that doesn't make any sense, you say you respectively disagree anyway. Well, that's called just being full of shit.
No. I believe your way is not as effective as my way of just.
Taylor, help me out here.
Ultimately, in a democracy, people will vote for their own self-interest. If I'm the richest one in this room right now, democracy is only going to work until you guys realize that you can vote yourself my money. Then it's going to stop working because I'm going to stop earning money because you guys are just going to take it. So democracy isn't a holy grail of an idea either.
Right. But respect for liberty is. That's why the important position here is the liberty respecting position. Now, my point is, money isn't everything. I plan to win the presidency in large part by traveling around the country and meeting groups of people face to face, as large as I can, and by the YouTube channel, and by a variety of other mechanisms. There is no reason to presume that money always wins the day. I refuse to accept that, and I'm going to go do the thing that I'm saying I can do. And if I fail, fine, we can have this conversation again. But my point is, I don't think it's been done properly before. I don't think a proper representative of the citizen democracy, as a citizen, coming forward and saying, let's actually do this properly, I'll be president, and I'll show you how it's supposed to be done. And I'm the most qualified person in America, and I also have a variety of advantages that I can turn to in terms of engaging with people and making them take me seriously as a candidate. So, the thing is, it's a matter of doing the thing. Everybody wants to talk about how impossible things are, or how possible things are, or how awful the circumstances of the status quo are. But they're not really thinking about solvency. I'm actually thinking about solvency. I'm saying, here's how we're going to change that. And it's not through congressional legislation, although I'm not against potentially advocating some sort of legislation. If I were going to embrace some sort of rights-limiting legislation, it wouldn't be the worst possible scenario that we have campaign contribution limits on corporations. I mean, it's not the most offensive kind of limit of liberty imaginable, but it's not a place where I want to begin a campaign, right? I'm certainly not campaigning upon that. I'm campaigning on the premise that money will ultimately be irrelevant. That if I can actually speak to people and have them hear me, communicate with me, hear my words, and hear me explain to them why they ought to prefer me, why I'm a better candidate, if I can have them look at my goddamn platform, if I can have them think about politics in a way that I present to them as preferable, that I communicate effectively enough, and if I am active enough, that I can generate a legitimate groundswell of a real alternative, an actual alternative, not some fucking polished politician who's representing anybody's interests, or even including his own. I'm representing the interests of the country. I'm becoming president because I actually am the most qualified in the country, so therefore I kind of have to at least try.
I like your campaigning ideology. That I don't disagree with. I think that's flawless what you just said. But when it comes down to believing in something to stop the problem through legislation, I believe you're saying you get me straight, and I could be wrong. You do want to stop a limited amount of money going into funding our politicians. You do want to stop that.
I would like to see money have less impact on outcomes. I would like to see money have less impact on outcomes.
Money. He wants to ignore money and have issues weighted on their validity. It's a lot of extroverted, intuitive, ideological thinking. And so from my perspective, I'm an SE dom, not a TE or any. I'm going to be probably mentally right in between the two of you on a lot of things. You can't separate money from power.
Talking with famous people.